Okay, we're back. I did not sift all of the castings, and that's because I would much rather go to the store, get a banana, and do my banana method. This is the way you saw me doing it earlier. It's too much work, and it's just going to take forever to get all those worms out. So I would rather conglomerate them all together, and then be able to pull them out in one big body mass rather than chasing each individual worm down. That's just too much. This is going to be way easier, and I should have thought about it before making this video, but I'm doing some experimental stuff on my bins. So what I thought we would do instead is, rather than go into building a whole new bin, because there's a ton of videos online about how to start a bin. So what I thought we would do was we would be checking in on an established bin that's going, not ready to be sifted. And in fact, we're going to add our worms that have been waiting to go in to that, because I believe they've settled it down far enough that we can fit it all in. But what we're starting out with here is, I wanted to show you the ingredients that I am currently using for my worm bedding. This here is a pile of the castings you just saw me sort. Now you can see it is jet black, and it is a little moist, but even when it dries out, it's still going to be very dark, and that's because it's got a whole bunch of nutrients in it. Worm castings, they've got over 60 micronutrients and trace minerals in them. Things like calcium, magnesium, nitrogen, phosphates, all the building blocks for a healthy plant, because a lot of people don't seem to understand that if you're a gardener, you like it as a hobby or as your whatever, it doesn't matter the quality of seed you have. It doesn't matter how much sunlight you have. None of that matters. It's completely inconsequential unless you have healthy soil. And this is what's going to make your soil healthy, biodiverse, and full of all kinds of stuff. One of the coolest things about it is that it rocks a natural neutral pH of 7.0. That is, it's not acidic, nor is it alkaline. It is perfectly dead center neutral. So any amendments you put with it, this is not going to throw that pH off at all, because some plants prefer different sides of the spectrum of soil. And you have to know that when you're planting your things. Worm castings also have about 4 to 5% more nitrogen than the average bag of garden soil you're going to buy in your Lowe's or your Home Depot or your Walmart or whatever gardening store that you're going to. Because today, they actually, very rarely do people sell just soil. It's always amended. It's always got all kinds of fertilizers and all kinds of things thrown in. And with this craze coming through, which is a good thing, I'm super stoked about it. Yay, 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 vermicomposting. A lot of companies are now adding worm castings to their potting mix, so they can amend it and enhance it and just make it really good stuff. Another thing that this has is it has humic acid, which is really important for plants to absorb the nutrients in the soil around them. The humic acid aids in that. It helps the plant absorb the nutrients around it, which is really helpful, obviously. And something that a lot of people don't know about worms and vermicomposting in general is that worms actually take out heavy metals and toxins in soil. So I've got a girlfriend in New York who has a property where heavy metals were dumped on it, and she has very, very toxic soil. And though I've tried to convince her for years to do this, it's just too much work for her, as you know, she is disabled, so she just can't manage, you know, reworming her whole yard just to get rid of the toxins and the heavy metals out. But they are good for that. So you can take some sick, unhealthy soil, put it through your vermicomposter, and come out with really rich, toxic-free fertilizer for your garden and your houseplants. I had mentioned earlier that worms are self-regulating, that they will only grow as much space and as much food as they have. So you can control your worm colony for how big or how small you want, but just keep in mind that the smaller the bin you're keeping, the harder it's going to be and the more work you're going to have to do to maintain a healthy environment for them that they like. So these are castings that we just sifted, and what these castings are made out of are these ingredients that I have surrounding over here. Now, your ingredients will vary because the fact is they can digest everything, biological, organic. That's what they do. They're little janitors. They break things down. They eat things. I've got a cat walking around here that might be getting curious. He's my disabled cat. He's got some brain damage. That's Olaf you see over there in the corner being bad. A spot's opened up, so he wants to go check it out. So anyways, these ingredients that I have here are things that I either already had, I had an overabundance of, and I'm just trying to blow through it, or they're just supplemental things that I've gotten just to sort of give the worms a much broader spectrum of a diet and bedding. This over here, this is cocoa coir. It's basically pulverized coconut shells that's been dried out and they're pressed into bricks, and you rehydrate it with some water. It's really great. Worms really, really love it. It feels like peat moss, but it smells very different and has a bit of a rougher texture. Right over here, we've got Timothy hay. Now, I say hay in particular because a lot of people want to put straw, and at one point I also was putting straw in, mostly just for bedding and filler, but straw is not really a good idea, and that's more than anything because it has a tendency to mold really badly, which isn't always bad, but secondly, there's no nutrients in straw. Hay is grass. Straw are the leftover stalks of wheat once it's been harvested. There is no nutritional value in straw whatsoever. But hay, your yard grasses, all those clippings, that's your green matter. That's going to help put some good stuff and some vitamins and nutrients into your bin for your worm. I get the little bag of Timothy hay. It's about $3 at Walmart. You can get it in the guinea pig section. And one bag of $3 hay lasts me about a year, because it's a pretty good sized, and like I said, I'm only keeping 4 bins at the moment. That's what I've been using, and it's going to last me even longer because I'm downsizing. Oops, bumped the camera. Now over here, we've got peat moss. Everybody knows what peat moss is. I ended up buying a huge brick of this at the Lowe's. It was just too awesome. It was $12 for a big, huge honkin' brick that has literally lasted me for a year. The majority of my worms bedding is the peat moss, and that is because I just have such an excess of it. I want it gone. I want it to go away. I want to turn it into something else, so I'm turning it into worm castings. Over here, I've got some wood shavings or some sawdust. These are particularly pine. I also get these at the Walmart for about $3.50 to $4 in the guinea pig section. Be very careful. As I stated specifically, these are pine shavings. You have to know if you're putting woods into your worm bin, what kind of wood it is. Is it an acidic wood? Is it a hardwood? Is it a softwood? Is it alkaline? For example, this being pine, this is their favorite kind of wood. However, if you put, and they do sell this right alongside of it, the cedar chips. Cedar is very acidic and very toxic for worms. It will not only make them sick, but it will probably end up killing your colony off slowly but surely, and you'll not know why. And that will be why, is because you put cedar into their bed. Now, they're very adaptive creatures, and I imagine if that's all you've got and that's all they've got and they have access to, the survival mechanism will kick in and they will eat whatever's around them, and they will just suffer the consequences. And that's, that's their thing. So pine shavings, pine, sawdust. I've got a lumberjack mill friend. He works at the lumber mill a couple doors down, and he used to get me some pine sawdust, but it's just, I hated harassing him all the time with my big Ziploc bags, and he felt silly bringing it out of work. So I just started buying it at Walmart. It's really cheap. This stuff here is actually steer manure that's already been pre-composted. It's the same bag that you buy at Lowe's, but it's got that poopiness that worms just love. That's what worms love. They love poop. They don't want human poop, and they don't care for dog or cat poop, but any other kind of poop is probably by far their favorite. And that's just to add a little bit of diversity into their diet, because I know they like it. And if they're chowing down on the poop that's mixed in, that means they're chowing down on all this other stuff as well. Now over here, what we've got, this little white powder, it's a very delicate powder, and you have to be careful when you're using it. This is powdered dolomite lime. A lot of people use it in the gardening, particularly in places like where I live that have an extremely high humidity. I live in Washington State, so it's wet and humid here all the time. And when you're doing something like keeping a worm bin, it can get really sour because it's too wet. It's not getting enough air. It's not breathing. Your soil is actually becoming anaerobic, and that's not good. It's not healthy for your worms. It smells terrible, especially if you have a small living place. This dolomite lime is the equivalent of sprinkling eggshells into your bin or your potting mix. It neutralizes whatever acidity or sourness is happening in your bin. This pulls it back to a more neutral pH. And it's gritty, so that helps, which is the next thing we're talking about is the sand. This is just regular play sand. Again, a $5 bag at Lowe's. I put it through a sifter to separate these finer granules from the, they're just a little bit thicker, not too terribly much, that I put in the tops of my potted plant to keep the fungus flies from laying eggs. So I'm left with this really, really fine sand. Now the sand and the dolomite lime are very similar in the sense that they're granular and they're kind of quartzy mica based. And that is because worms are like chickens in the sense that they need grit. They need grit to digest their food. If you just give them all these things in here, they very well might try to leave because they don't have anything hard to help break their food down in their systems for them. So the sand and the dolomite lime both add a little bit of grit as well as some nice neutral stuff. Now this last one I've got here, as you can see, is a bunch of torn up pieces of paper. Now a lot of people use the worm bins and they start out when they're making them to put a bunch of paper in there. Now putting paper in there is okay, that's all right. They will break it down, they will tear it up. However, be mindful of how much paper that you're putting into your bin, because one thing that happens that is just kind of a headache is when your paper gets wet. See, they've got a bunch of pieces here all nicely stacked. I had the same thing in here, but now it's this giant mess of smushed together things that are serving no purpose other than making a big honkin' thick piece of wet rotting paper. You want them to get in between the layers and to tear it up. So when you're fluffing it and you're adding paper, be mindful of it. Be mindful that you don't have big massive clumps of paper in one area so it wads up. And another thing is, I'm really, really kind to my worms. They don't usually get things like newspapers, and that's because I can use the newspapers for other things. However, I'm pretty picky about giving them a bunch of dye. I don't like to give them a bunch of dye. One of the things you can put in is things like your soda pop cardboard containers. They like cardboard. They love cardboard. But one thing you have to keep in mind when you're doing that is when you're adding this cardboard into your bin, you're also adding this glue. You're also adding the glue that adheres the cardboard into one solid mass. It's not like corrugated paper that's just put together with a light glue. This is a commercial product. It happens to be, you can imagine and tell what that is, but this is also a good example of I don't give my worms this because of the excessive amount of dye. I don't like to give my worms a bunch of dye, and I don't like to give them a bunch of glue. So there are other ways I can recycle and reuse these kinds of paper. The typical paper that goes into my bins are things like paper plates, napkins, coffee filters, and very rarely do I actually put them into the bin itself. In fact, I tend to put it into their food and let it start breaking down a little bit before I actually feed it to them. So that being said, we've gone over all these ingredients, and like I said, this is just to show you what is in the bin we're about to look at. By no means is this what your bin should be. Again, this is just what I had on hand and what I've noticed just works really well and makes a really beautiful, nice loamy. You know, they're going to make anything into this. I can tell you that. It doesn't matter what the ingredients are out here, as long as they're organic and they're biodegradable, they will be composted into this beautiful, rich, loamy, nutrient-rich amendment for your garden, for your house plants and whatnot. So we're going to slide this away, and we're going to expose here our under bin, which, if you can tell, if you're a cat owner, this is the top of a kitty litter bucket. In fact, it's a double stacked kitty litter bucket. I've left the handles on both so I can lift this top one up. There are holes in this top bucket. There are holes drilled around the bottom on the edge, and as well as up underneath to allow any leachate or extra moisture that's in the bin to fall through into this underside bucket, where I can either harvest the leachate or get rid of it, or do what, fish out what worms have made it down there and toss them back in top. They've got obviously lots of breathing holes. They've got some, oops, wrong side. Oh, no, I didn't do that. Oh, this was my new bucket. I didn't put extra holes in it. My bad. So this is a lid that I made a while ago, and I just keep using it between bins, just, your basic hole drills. This is some old window screening that I saw one of our maintenance men had chucked into the garbage, and I pulled it out and gave it a good wash. So here we go with a little bit of dollar store clear caulking. So what we're going to do now is we're going to pop this lid open and probably surprise the hell out of the worms that are inside, because they like it dark. And we're going to give them a good stir and check their conditions, and then we're going to add this other bucket, and then we're going to feed them. All right, let's see what's going on in here. Oh yeah, we've got some up on the edge. One thing you are going to see a lot if I end up doing more of these kinds of videos is, and I can't find one, where is it? Oh no, did I cut the tips off of all of them? All right, well, I've got to fetch another one. The number one tool that I use, whoa, shoot, sorry about that. That's my big size 9 feet. Is bamboo kebab skewer. This is my favorite tool to use in my worm bin, and that's because it has a nice sharp end. I don't have to touch the worms. If they're on the edge, like you can kind of sort of see here, let me spin this around, you can get a good look at this side. They're on there. They're hanging out. These three up here are breeding. They're having themselves a nice little worm orgy. And that's how they do it. They're just running along and they're like, hey, you feel good. Hey, you feel good. Let's make some babies. The elongation of how long they're stretched out, that's also a good indication that they're breeding. But I just happen to know what I'm looking at. This guy down here, he's trying to get in on it, but they're on the move because the light's now on them. This guy's a little confused. He's not sure where he wants to go. So we're going to flick him off, which is what the stick is for. I can slide it down, never touch them with it, and just push them off. I don't have to smush them or roll them or do anything like that to try to get them off. I can just go, watch, I'm about to screw up this party. Flick, flick, and put them back down in the bin. Except we've got some sprouts growing. Okay, I don't see any more immediately here, so I am going to pop this lid off. Whoops. And we're going to get a good look at our bin. Okay, so we've got our little piece of biochar here. Oh, that looks good. Not only is it cool because it just makes a nice chunk of biochar, but it helps keep the smell down too, which oddly enough is not really a problem if you have a healthy bin. It doesn't matter what kind of action you've got going on in here. If it's healthy, it will not stink. I don't care if you put rotten food in it. If it smells bad, something is wrong. If it smells like anything less than a healthy forest floor, something is wrong, and you need to figure out what it is and address it if you want to keep a healthy colony. So we've got some more guys on the edge here. We're going to flick them off. Here, let's get a few in our hand. He's all, reew! He's trying to hurry up and get away. Reew! Come here. I like the ones that jump. One of the things that a lot of people will talk about not doing is they say no matter what, you should never toss your bin, and that's bullshit. What you need to do is toss your bin at least once a month. I would say probably once a month. No, don't do it every week. That's too stressful for the worms. But the thing is, when these guys, whether they're put in brand new bedding or they're put in an established bin, they dig around, they explore, they find areas, and they make highways. They make roadways that the other worms use as well, which is another way they meet each other and make babies, is they run into each other in the hallways. Now, when they're all using those hallways and those hallways are established, that means you've got big chunks and pockets of earth and stuff that's not being touched at all. They're not being broken down. They're not being composted. They're not staying, you know what I mean? They're not being actively moved. This is why you need to upset your bin once a month and give it a good tossing, is to break and move and scatter those hallways and make them build new ones. Because every time they're eating and they're digging and they're making a new hallway, they're pooping and they're peeing, and that is where the nutrients come. That is what worm castings are, is worm poop. It's wet because it's worm poop and pee. That's what it is. So you want them digging around and exploring more than just always being on the same road, because just that one road is going to be getting turned into fertilizer and is going to be active. So you want to toss it. You want to make them be making new roadways, so they're always traveling through the matter. And looks like we've got some babies in here. Oh, no, that was just cat hair. Okay, we're going to move their charcoal off over to the side here, and we're going to take a look at our bin. See, we got some sprouts growing in here. No big deal. You get a sprout, just pull it up. It becomes part of the compost. A lot of times I will put a layer of wood chips on top, just so I know kind of what's going on, in the sense of, I know when I put that there, I can see how much activity they're coming on the top, how much they're pulling it down in, how much they're eating, and how much they're breaking down. But it also, usually during the day, I'll flip my lids open and turn the bright light on like it is now, and that forces them to run into the bedding, because I don't want them out here milling around. I don't want them on the edge. I want them inside the bin, working, eating, doing what they're supposed to be doing. So the light chases them down in there and keeps them down in there. However, when you do that, you've got a whole top layer of stuff that's not getting any action because they're underneath, hiding from the light. So when you toss a layer of something like this, or a piece of newspaper, make sure it's, damp, not wet, but damp, that it won't hurt their little bodies, that they can now successfully climb on top of that earth while not being on top. They can travel between the layer of wood chips and the soil, and that top stuff is actually getting worked. So that's kind of why I do that. But at this point is when I start mixing it in, because I want to check the conditions. I fed them not long ago. It's probably been a couple weeks. I usually feed once a week, but like I said, I'm trying some new stuff here. And I'm learning. I got a big ass rock in there. Oh, hey, little dude on my head. Ooh. Rock is okay. That'll give us an air pocket in there. So we're going to try to find, I just found them. Like I said, there's usually a big mass of them when they congregate, and it's usually around the most prolific food source. I can feel them in there. They feel like wet, warm spaghetti. It's pretty gross. I'm going to flip that up so I can feel there's some whole grass in there. We're going to pull these guys up. It's moist, but it's not wet. And I can see by looking at this that they've run out of food that I gave them, and they have begun to eat the wood chips that are present. And I can tell that because the wood chips are kind of dry and they're smaller and kind of flaky. So there's a lot in this hay in here, and they're loving that. Hay and grasses, all that yard detritus has so many nutrients for them. So this is what's going on, and this is what worms do. When you feed them, they eat it. But you want to give them good bedding that they're going to want to eat also, because when they run out of food source, they're going to eat whatever they can. And that is always these cellulose-based products, such as the branches, the trees, the plants, all that green stuff that's in there. And they're going to be eating the dirt as well as a byproduct, but dirt's not their favorite. They don't want to eat dirt. They don't want to spread. They want food. So they're like anything else. If you and I were left on we're starving on an island and we had no food source, but we had a really lush green lawn, we would eat the grass until we could find something better too. And that's, I think, what a lot of people kind of take advantage of by way of their worm bins, is they just give them their bedding and a few scraps and they're like, they're worms, who cares? But I do, because first and foremost, I don't want them breaking this down too terribly fast. And that's because, like I said earlier, I don't have a use for all these castings, not right now. I'm having fun with my worms. I'm having fun learning. This guy's active. He's mad. Raw. No, he's not. He's flipping around. But they need more. If you're going to be an animal owner, if it's a working animal or not, you know what? Be nice to them. Give them some more scraps. Give them a varied diet. They will breed prolifically. They will provide you with all kinds of castings. Yeah, I can tell. See, I'm getting down on the bottom there, and there's a whole lot of drying out grass and hay, and that's because they ran out of food, meaning food from my kitchen. I give them a pretty broad-ranging diet, but I'm going to get down in here and get a feel of what's going on at the very, very bottom of the bin. And it feels pretty dry. Not dry as you and I recognize dry, but dry in a good sense that it's not too wet. That I'm not pouring a bunch of liquid out the bottom of my bucket. You can see this big clump of wood chips here. This is a good indication that they've been down there sucking everything off of and around these wood chips. Because that's not what my bedding looks like. That's what they do when they're hungry. A lot of people don't also understand, get in there, buddy, that the worms are not actually eating these things. People think, they're eating carrots, they're eating my veg. Well, they're not actually. They're not eating any of this. What is happening is, get in there, buddy, is a bacteria forms and shows up in the rotting matter. And the bacteria boogies around and starts eating the matter, the organic matter, and pooping all over it. And that is the notorious rotting garbage smell that we all hate and so much. Now the worms come along and, this thing's covered in bacteria. It's just covered in bacteria that's already starting to break it down. It's got no integrity. It's all flaky. I've got worms in my fingers. But the bacteria is eating and breaking this down. And then these guys come along and they eat the bacteria that's eating the hay. They eat the bacteria poop that's being left to rot and break down the hay. That is what the worms are eating. They're eating the bacteria and the bacteria poop. So when they run out of those kinds of things, meaning when the bacteria colony might slow down because it's running, it's trying to stabilize itself because it's like, okay, we've got a buttload of hay and straw here. Let's just pace ourselves. We'll break it down. And as they do, the worms come along and eat it. That pocket of wood chips I showed you, that was the worms rushing to where a bacteria colony had happened and was breaking down that stuff. So they went through and they ate it, suck, which is the number one reason also why I actually feed my worms anaerobic food. I don't feed them aerobically. I gotta get down here in the bottom. Give them a good toss. Loosen that up. Oops, we just lost a guy over the edge. Whee! He's a big guy. Don't worry, dude. I saved you. Okay. It's looking pretty good in here. In fact, I'm not sure I might want to be adding any more of this other stuff, because as you can see that since I've been fluffing it here, aerating it, messing up their little hallways, that I've actually raised the level of this bin quite a bit. Now in a couple days, this will settle back down once they start making their hallways again, and it'll go down about an inch or so. But I think I'm actually going to refrain from putting, we got to get in the center here, because I can feel a bunch of hay. There we go. Now this does get easier the more it breaks down, because there's not quite so much whole matter going on. But I'm pretty happy with how this is tossed right now. Which leads us into our very next step, which is going to be feeding them. The one thing you will be told a considerable amount about is how you must never feed your worms anaerobic food. And this is not only not the case, but I have found it to be rather the opposite. I have found that my worms absolutely prefer and love anaerobic food. And there is, I imagine, a reason why. And that is because when you put a hunk of lettuce on here, sure, the worms are going to climb all over it. They're going to be like, but what they're looking for is the bacteria. And it's going to take time for bacteria to form on that lettuce, and then it's going to start breaking down. But in the meantime, all the worms are trying to beat each other and race each other to get to the bacteria, to eat the bacteria. And every time they eat all the bacteria, it's going to take longer for that lettuce to break down, because the worms are eating all the bacteria that's breaking the lettuce down. Do you see what I'm saying? So I have found that in giving them anaerobic food, that it is already so laden with bacteria on such a level that it actually outnumbers my colony, my worm colony. Get in there, buddy. And everybody gets to eat. It's not all these big guys pushing out all the babies and the little guys that the little guys can't eat, and they've got to struggle, and then they're sort of mediocre sized worms. You know what I mean? Everybody gets to eat because there's plenty to go around. And these guys aren't like dogs. These guys won't eat themselves to death. They'll eat till they're full, and then they'll cruise on, and they'll come back later, and they'll be like, hey, I'll have some more bite. They're very human-like that way. So, excuse me, which is another reason why I, as a worm keeper, feel confident in putting things like onions and garlic, pardon me, got dust up my throat, into my worm food. And that's because I let it set and break down for so long that all the harmful properties of the onions and the garlics that are harmful and going to actually hurt and injure these guys has already started its decomposition. So it's much milder, and it's not harmful for them at all. In fact, they quite love it. Look at them. They're trying to find some place to go. Look, they're tying on to each other. Aren't they being cute? They're holding hands. Aww. So, what I do is, what I like to do, and it does vary, I do change the place that I feed them on the core, and that's because when they do, they stay there like a big giant ball, like I said, of meat spaghetti. And you don't want to always feed them there, because then they're just going to be hanging out there. So you move your food bin, you make them cross constantly. You're always making them move around your bin to get their food. They know what food smells like. They know when food's been put in. They know what to do with it. Sometimes what I do is I'll make, ooh, I just felt somebody squish. Hey, little dudes. Worms. Is I'll make a little hole like this, a little tunnel that's about as, deep as my hand is here. And then I'll put some, usually some dry matter, maybe even some, if I'm running low on chips, wood chips in the bin, I'll put some in the bottom to help soak up some of that juice that's going to flow through. I don't want it flowing all the way through. I want it to stay and saturate the area so they will eat that area. But what I prefer to do, and this is just because I like the babies being able to eat in a timely manner too, is hang on, I've got a little dude up on the edge here. Whee! Come on, buddy. He's a biggin. He's looking to get out. He's looking for food. He's looking for food. That is the one thing. If you open your bin in the morning and you see a buttload of worms up on the edge, if you can't identify them as automatically being in the throes of passion, chances are they're either trying to get air or they're looking for food, because that's why worms move. When it rains and you go outside and there's worms everywhere, they're not out for a stroll. It's just easier for them to locomotive, in the rain because of their body style and because of how small they are. They can cover much more vast distances of ground in the rain because they're slick and they can literally slide and go to a different patch of ground to find food. Again, they're not looking for mates. They're not looking for anything but food. That's why you see a bunch of worms out when it's raining, is they're like, woo, a chance to go get a new condo in the new place. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make myself a little elongated, because they've eaten it all down so well and there are absolutely no remnants that I saw of food. I'm going to make a nice long trough for them. And again, it's about up to my knuckles here. So, it's that deep is what I'm doing it. And the point of this is you want to put your food down in there, and then you want to be able to flip some of this over and cover it up in order to trap the smell. Now, here is where people, I think, might get horrified, is my food bin of anaerobic food. I got this at the dollar store. It's just a regular dollar plastic bin. I burp it every day. And I put the great majority of my kitchen scraps in here. I don't put things like root vegetables I will put in here, but they take an extremely long time to break down, and that's because they grew in the ground. They don't mind going back in the ground. So what I did a few days ago was I put some extra stuff in here, and I usually mix it up, but I didn't because I knew I was going to be making this video. So let's pop it, pow, and take a look and see what's on the inside. Look at that. Pew! We've got some coffee filter. We've got a bunch of bread. If you can see here, we've got some white fuzz going on the edge. They're going to devour that. They absolutely love that stuff. And this is where I put the majority of my paper products, is in here, in their food bin, so it can start soaking up some of these juices and start breaking down automatically. And of course, any of the sugars and yeast and bread is to die for. So, make sure we don't have any stuck on the bottom there. We're going to give this a nice mix real quick. I mean, and this has everything. It's got fruit, it's got vegetables, it's got juicing pulp from juicing in the morning. It's got everything except meat, oils, fats, and citrus. Everything else goes in here. And I keep this one really, really broke down and gross because they can eat it and tear it up pretty quickly. Get in there. There you go. It's nasty, isn't it? Raw! It's funny, until I started doing vermicomposting, this was always a thing for me. But now that I understand the process of actually what's happening in this bowl and the joy that it's going to bring my colony, I don't smell garbage anymore. I just smell worm food. So you can see there's a piece of onion right there. We've got some grapes. Those have been in there for a while. They're nice and smushy now. You saw the coffee filters. I don't put a lot of tomatoes in, and for two reasons. One, I tend to eat most of my tomato, but also tomatoes come with those little white worms. See, we got some root vegetable carrots in here. Those have been in here long enough now that they're actually pretty soft and breaking down. So that'll be a yummy treat for them. What was I just saying? I can't remember. What a bad video maker I am. So then we've got our food. We've got our trough. I'm going to put some extremely healthy helpings in here. We're going to fill this trough up. We're going to fill it up, and they're going to tear it up. Look at that. See all that food that's going in there? That was roughly 2 handfuls. They're going to eat this in about 7.5 to 8 days. All of it. And then they're going to start spreading out again in the bin to look for more. So we're going to mush this out a little bit. Now, when you have it laid out in a trough like this, get off the edge, buddy. Everybody can come up and get a chance. It's not like if you're just making a ball, then only whoever can fit on that ball can eat. And then all the other people are left on the outside going, I can't fit, I can't fit, I can't fit. This way, people can eat from the sides. I call them people. How funny is that? Worms can eat from the side, they can eat from the top, and they can eat from underneath. So that way, everybody's getting some food. Then we take a little bit of this, pinch it off, and just cover it up lightly. Don't smush on it. So look at that. There's some worms in there. They're going to get first dibs. They're going to bury down in there, and they're going to go, oh my God, dinner. So we just cover it up lightly, and that's it, guys. That's it. I got to take this. You know what? I'll just rinse it. Move all off. Let me rinse my glove real quick. But the reason I think that was probably just a terrible video choice, but it is what it is. I'm an amateur. What can I say? A lot of people, when they're telling you that you shouldn't be feeding your worms anaerobic food, is because they believe, and it is for the most part, anaerobic bacteria is better. It's healthier for everybody, for humans, for animals, for this, that, and the other. But it's not necessarily anaerobic, a bad bacteria. It's just a different bacteria. It's just different than aerobic bacteria. That's all it is. And like I said, I've done my experiments where I've put piles of basically fresh tossings in here, and it takes forever to break down. Okay, so I think my phone just shut off on me, and it's tired of me making videos, and I can't remember what I was talking about before it just pooped out on me. So I'm going to try to recover this as much as I can and say thanks for watching the video. I think I'm probably going to end up making some more. I hope I covered some information that you guys might find helpful and to your liking. We have an escapee. Escapee! The great escape! Oh no! Because I love my worms. And I would love to talk with you guys more about them if you have any more questions. So, comment, do all that good stuff if you care. If you don't care not to and want to lurk, that's fine too. I'm a bit of a lurker myself sometimes. But if you have any specific questions that I might not have covered, I know there's a lot I would love to share with you guys, and my mind gets going all over the place because I get so excited about them. So maybe you guys can help guide me on what I need to be talking about or what you would like me to talk about and share with you guys. So we're going to tuck these guys in. Oh, wait, we got to put their charcoal back in. Whee! Charcoal for you guys. Oh, that's a fatty. Check him out. Whoa! I have a lot of big fat worms. They're a really healthy colony. See you later on, dudes. Later on, dudes.